Hi, thank you for joining today. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Cyndi Willems-Gibson. I'm the Quality Assurance Manager here at GreenSeal Cannabis Company. We are a Health Canada approved licensed producer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. And I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about managing mold and bacteria in cannabis. We'll start today by talking a bit about the growing process, and then we'll break down some of the economic trade-offs. So the motivation for this topic was basically that mold is perhaps the biggest risk during cultivation of cannabis. It can slash the value of your crop literally overnight. If you have full-blown mold across your crop, you are not going to be able to salvage any of it. There's always important compromises between cost, so money, time, space, and reducing that risk. So we'll talk about some of those. So we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the key monitoring points that we put into place here. They have to be identified to ensure that that risk is reduced. So the basics. Basically, we have to choose disease-resistant strains. So there's a tray of clones there. Those clones have to be taken from a healthy mom plant. And those two things together help ensure that the next crop is going to be healthy. This is one of our rooms where we actually take those clones. So you'll see that it's a lot of very cleanable equipment. The room itself looks fairly clean. Those trays that you see in the back there, they're all cleaned out before they actually put plants in them. So there's a lot of different things that we do to try and avoid mold in the environment as well as on the plants. Airflow. So airflow is very, very important, especially in the flower spaces. That airflow helps to make sure that we don't have any hot spots where we have higher humidity or temperature. Temperature and humidity. So the plants like to be around 25 to 30 degrees Celsius or 77 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we usually keep the humidity somewhere between 55 and 60%. The biggest problem is that with cannabis, that those plants and mold like to be at that same temperature humidity. So we try to keep things a little bit on the drier side and keep that good airflow to make sure that we don't get any of those, like I called them before, hot spots. One of the other things about cannabis is that to go into a flower cycle, they need a dark and light period. So because of that, that timing, when the lights first go out, basically the temperature of the leaf cools off very quickly, and that increases the dew point on the leaf. And then basically we could have condensation on that leaf, which increases the moisture and therefore the potential for mold. So a lot of times what we do is we turn off some of the lights about 15 minutes early, and then we turn off more of the lights so that it's not such a drastic temperature change. And we also change our airflow a little bit around that time just to make sure that we're managing that. You'll see here the bottom of these plants are pruned right up. I don't know how closely you can see that, but there's a bunch of nodes at the bottom that are all cut off. We do that on purpose to make sure that we can get good airflow underneath the plants as well, and we remove some of those large leaves on the bottom that restrict the airflow. Air handling is another way that we manage mold in our rooms. So we do have some fresh air that comes in, a very small amount. The rest of the air is recirculated specifically from each room. It comes back into the same room. But we do have filters on there. And we also have UV lights. So the UV lights will actually kill spores that are in the air, in the ductwork. Okay, I brought cleaning up again. So I'm going to talk a lot about cleaning because we do a lot of cleaning. Basically, you'll see the first one's in green, the second one's in blue. The reason that I did that is more internally. We color code here. So anything green in our facility is more in the grow spaces. Anything that's blue is what we call post-harvest. So it's after the plant's been cut down. And those areas we treat more like a food handling area. And then cross-contamination. So we do, oops, sorry about that. Available water, moisture, and time. So one of the things that we have to do a lot of in the post-harvest areas is that we have to make sure that we manage the moisture and the temperature at the time that it takes to dry. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Now I'm at cross-contamination. So cross-contamination, every day we've got a crew that's always going around cleaning handles, doorknobs, light switches, equipment, anything that could potentially cross-contaminate from one area to another. And then I just threw this up here. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about the inspection points later, but at every one of those stages, we have a lot of different inspection points. So we're monitoring temperature, humidity, we're monitoring airflow, we're monitoring the cleaning of all the equipment, the cleaning of the rows, that the pruning was done, the plant health was done. There's a lot of different checks and balances that go on during the entire process. Okay, so this next one is, you'll see our master grower there, that's Chad. He's the one that manages all the plants out in our grow spaces. So pre-harvest quality vegetative flower and harvest. We need to start with that clean product, that clean area prior to repopulating the space. It has to be free of debris. So every day we've got people out there cleaning up soil, leaf litter. We don't have many weeds in here, but occasionally one pops up. We do use a soilless mix. We make sure that all the garbage containers in the rooms are covered at all times so that if there was something that went in there, it can't come back out. They're emptied at the end of the day every single day. We make sure that we've got those really healthy plants in there. And if we keep that low micro on the plants, it helps us later on down the line. So as I mentioned before, we clean at that post-harvest stage. We clean everything to like a food grade standard. So we harvest into those clean buckets and we ensure that any foreign material, so like the soilless mix, we put trellis on our plants. We have beneficial bug packs that are in there. We make sure that none of that gets into the post-harvest process. So one other thing to note that in this whole plant health process, I want to talk economics, just dedicated to plant health for one crop, like pruning, removing those dead leaves, tidying, cleaning the grow areas and everything, we dedicate about $3,500 in labor hours for every 40 kilo lot. So it can be pretty significant, but it's obviously very important too. All right, so I've got a little picture here of botrytis. This is not from our facility, taken directly from the internet. Not that it's never happened here. So basically, botrytis and powdery mildew are two of the biggest concerns that we're worried about for mold. Botrytis, once we get it, basically that piece of the plant has to be taken right out of the facility. Like it's just snipped right off and removed. Powdery mildew, we can do a few things in-house. We don't use pesticides here, but we do use occasionally something like Millstop, which is basically just baking soda and water that changes the pH of the leaf and helps the plant to not grow powdery mildew. We also use sulfur. So burning sulfur at night will help to kill that powdery mildew. Problem is that the sulfites can become an allergen. So we have to be really careful with that one as well. We do use UV on the line every day. So not every day, but several times a week. So we run UV across the plants. About 1 to 2 seconds will stop the spores from growing. So it's just those little vegetative spores so that they don't put spores into the air. It doesn't actually kill the mold that's on the plant. And we also will use the UV in between crops. So once we've cleaned everything down, we can do a 30-second pass on there, and that will actually kill spores in between. We can't do that on the plants because it will actually kill the plants. So basically, I go back to this one, this botrytis. If we lost a crop to botrytis, or even powdery mildew, we could essentially be looking at upwards of like $160,000 for one lot that we lose in revenue. And then we also lose all the resources that were put into it. So it's pretty significant. We definitely do not want to lose a crop to that. And again, the cleaner the product is here, the cleaner it will be at the end. So we try to avoid any type of mold in this process at all if we can. This is just an example. So after we harvest the plants, I go in, my background is in food. So I end up doing a food style setup here, which seems to work very well. Basically, in the processing room, we clean the area prior to populating the space. And again, there's all kinds of monitoring that's done. What you see on the screen there is an ATP analyzer. So once we're done cleaning, we'll come around and we just swab for any biological residue. Our guys, if you know anything about cannabis, 420 is like the golden number. And we use that here as our release criteria for ATP, and the guys get a big kick out of it. And, you know, at least it's for them, they aim to get below that 420, and they're, you know, it's fun for them anyway. It keeps them cleaning. So then we'll move immediately after we've processed it. We move immediately to clean drying screens. So we have a team, again, that's always cleaning. About a quarter of our staff, our production staff, is actually dedicated 100% just to cleaning and turning over rooms. So that alone, that reduces the risk a little bit. So we put it onto clean drying screens, and then those screens, they're tossed every once in a while, and we just make sure that we get good airflow on there. Okay, so I've got two different things here. We used to do what they call a dry trim. We now do a wet trim. There's some pros and cons to that. I can talk a little bit to that in a second, but dry trim basically means that you hang the plants up first. You let them dry to a certain moisture, and then you trim them. And a wet trim means that you harvest the plants, you trim them right away, get all that excess leaf off, and then you dry them. So basically, we have to remove the moisture from the flower in a controlled manner. That's the biggest thing. So that room is very, very important. Costs a little bit to set up in the beginning, but the payoff is definitely there. You need the ability to fully control the room independently. You have to have more than enough dehumidification ability, which we learned as our crops got bigger. We realized that maybe we couldn't keep up. So we've made some significant adjustments back there, which are really, really helping. And all our new rooms are set up that way, and it's working great. We must have humidity control, not just dehumidification on the product, because with cannabis, if you can dry it quickly and it makes a harsh product, you need to have that room temperature controlled. You need to have good airflow, and we actually keep it very dark during the process. So you need to be able to make sure that the lights are off. All right, so this is just an example of the differences that we found during our hang dry and our wet trim. So a couple things here, pro wet trim, less space was taken up. So when you hang all those plants up, it takes up a significant amount of space because you have all that extra biomass in there. If you wet trim, it actually takes up a lot less space, and there's a lot less moisture in the room to dry out because you don't have all those stalks and stems. We also believe that this helps to reduce the potential for mold growth just because you have more control and there's less biomass. Less trichomes taken off the plant. So in cannabis, the THC trichomes that are on there, you can actually knock them off during a dry trim, and it ends up in like the byproduct rather than on the flower. So we found here that if you wet trim, it maintains some of those trichomes and you have a higher THC in your end product. Some things that we have found is that with a wet trim, it takes more cleaning. There's a lot more residue left on the product when they're done. It takes longer to turn the room over, and we need a lot more production staff for a wet trim all at the same time. So the biggest problem with this is that we can't, we have a big spike in labor for those days. So we can't switch anything else on those days. We sometimes even have to beg back like office staff to help because it's just too much all at one time. So we've worked through that now, but it's it can be a struggle. So learning. And of course, you don't want to bring back people that don't know how to handle the product because, again, cross-contamination, lots of training involved. So we got to make sure that we have the right people doing the right job. Okay, this is just a little graph of some of the timing for the initial dry. Basically, whether you do a dry trim or a wet trim, you get that same sort of a curve. So we're starting upwards of 70% moisture, and we need to get that down very, very quickly in the first day. So first day or 2 days, we don't want to have that higher moisture for too long a time, because then it gives the mold more time for growth. So on the other side of that, the flip side, if you dry it too quickly, you can get this harsh product. So a longer cure. So basically there's initial dry and then there's a curing process. That initial dry, we usually do in about 2 days. We bring it down to 30%. We put it into a closed bucket, bag, whatever, seal it up for 6 hours. We take it back out of that bag, and that just evens out the moisture throughout the whole lot. Put it back on drying racks, bring the moisture down a little bit more. We make sure that the available water is less than about 0.56, and then that makes sure that we've got minimal potential for mold growth. And then we hold it at that moisture for another 7 to 10 days, roughly. Now this is the curing. So what you see there is a sea vault. You can use any kind of bucket to keep that moisture in. So basically, this is what I was just talking about, that 30% moisture. We do this bucket sweat. Doesn't sound very appealing, but that's what it does. It pulls the moisture out of the stems in the middle and brings it to the side so that we can dry it more evenly. We put it back on those drying screens. We bring it under that 0.6 available water, and then we bring it down to around a 12% moisture. All right. And then terminology, we burp the bins every day while it's curing. And that just off gases and just make sure that the product's maintaining a good, even moisture. We check the moisture every day. We sometimes we'll check terpenes and things like that as well. Basically, it does, we do a lot of tests during this period to make sure that we're monitoring that moisture and available water as tightly as we can. There's a few things that we can do. If we want to increase the moisture, there's a Bovita pack there. There's Bovita Integra. There's a lot of different types of packs that will adjust the moisture to bring it up, or we can spread it out on drying racks again and bring the moisture down. We use hundreds of grams of moisture, of flour for moisture tests. So I'll talk to that again in a second. Basically, we need consistent, repeatable, reproducible results in order to get that quality. All right. So this is just nothing to do with cannabis, but we apply food curing and aging science to cannabis. So that's why we need to understand the available water and the moisture. We need to understand what is a good available water and moisture for cannabis. And another economic trade-off here. So 10% moisture product loss and 13% could be close to mold growth. So we try to keep it in that tight window. Basically, for every 1% difference in one batch, it's about a $1,600 difference. So if we package our product at 12% versus 11%, that's giveaway, right? So this is basically why we cure the product. Just like meat or cheese or tobacco or anything, curing brings out the aromas and the flavors, and it accentuates those natural terpenes. Okay, so some of the testing that we do, we use a Rototronic available water meter, and we use a HE53 Mettler-Toledo moisture analyzer, pretty basic equipment. The nice thing about the available water is that it's a simple internal test. Anybody on the line can do it. It's non-destructive, so it's fairly quick. It's a good indicator for mold growth, again, taken from the food industry. 0.6 seems to be around whether it's, obviously it's different for different things, but 0.6 seems to be where herbs and stuff like that are good to avoid mold growth. And it's a really quick test. So One of the things about that is, especially when the moisture is really, really high, it might only take 7 or 8 minutes to get the available water. But if we were to run the moisture test on it, it might take 45 minutes to an hour. So the moisture analyzer, it's also a simple internal test. We've trained lots of people here how to do it. It's a destructive test, but it is industry standard. So definitely that's what we use when we're finally releasing our product. This is our measurement for giveaway. So it tells us basically if we're going to save that $1,600 or $3,200, or if we're going to give it away. And then it takes much longer, as I was mentioning, if the flower is wet or fresh. So it can take a significantly long time, but the nice thing about it is basically you prep it, you put it in there, you walk away, and you come back for a result. So it's at least not that bad. So we do use hundreds of grams of product in testing, again, just to make sure that we're monitoring our moisture and available water, which again could be hundreds, even thousands of dollars. We do take, for every batch that we produce, we do actually have somebody that takes about 8 hours worth of testing. So just for moisture. So, you know, it can add up significantly. At the end of the day, all this helps to ensure a quality product that we can be proud to put the green seal of approval on. So just so that we can review quickly, summary of the trade-offs. There's a significant cost of labor hours just for cleaning and maintaining plant health, but it reduces the chance of mold. The dollar value of the product at 10% versus 13% can be significantly different. So it's value added to do all that extra testing. The cost of testing in-house and external adds up, but as I just mentioned, there's a reason we do it. The loss of product due to mold is significant. So this is why we put so much preventative in place. And the consumer perception, so quality of the product, not too dry, hay smell, harsh product, is very, very important. So thank you. I appreciate your time. If you do want to reach out to GreenSeal Cannabis, our website is there at the bottom of the page. If you have any specific questions that you wanted to ask, you can send it to info@greensealcannabis.com, or you can send it directly to me at my email. All right. Thank you so much again. Take care.